We've reached the final video on doing this deck project on the front of our house. Today, in this video, we're going to tackle getting the deck boards put down, cut, installed properly, and some of the things I went through to have that turn out the way I wanted it to. It started out with some issues that I think you'll want to take note of that again had to do with the types of fasteners I was using, what it was recommended for the job, and what I eventually had to use to make this work. But we got it done, looks pretty good, so stick around if you want to see how I got this done, what I went through, and how I worked my way out of the problem that got created. So let's get started. Tomorrow, I will get an early start on putting these deck boards in. I've got enough carried over here to get started. I have to leave a gap here, obviously, because I have to get clips in and get this first board started. But before I do that, I'm going to follow the manufacturer's recommendation when I've got good light on here and check the pattern of the boards. I carried them over so the grain is the way it's supposed to be according to the instructions, but there's different coloration, and I want to make sure the coloration moves evenly throughout here rather than dark streak through here and a light streak through here. I want to make sure these boards are mixed and matched so I get the best appearance. And once I do that, I'll start cutting to length and securing the boards in with the clip system. You won't see any fasteners on these boards. And I have more than enough boards to do this job. And you can see also the challenge I'm going to have installing these, because there's a curve in each board coming off from the pallet, and that's why I have a special tool to get those straightened out as I start to install them. And then I'm going to have to cut all the ends to square them up, and I've checked different videos on this, and it's a common problem with the various brands of composite decking. They don't come out of the factory with a completely square edge. So I'm going to go right down the line on all of these and take a little bit off to square it up. And it's on that far end where I'll make the cut to make it to the right length. But again, I want to wait till the stuff is a little bit warmer. And I want to figure out where to set the clips, the starter clips, and get that first board started on here. So hopefully we can get that done today and get in a position where we can just start cutting and sliding these boards into position. This morning, as planned, once the sun was hitting all of this, I shuffled these boards around. We've got it spread out pretty well now, so I'm satisfied with that. I'll obviously have to fill a couple boards in next to the house and take a look at that when I bring those over, but I'm ready to start cutting ends and securing boards. It's about 9:45 on yet another beautiful October morning. It almost froze last night, but it's up to about 50 degrees right now. I'm in the sun, and there's hardly any breeze today. Yesterday, the wind could have carried you away. So we need to stay at this and get these deck boards down. Now that the picture framing is in place and properly secured, looks pretty good. I checked it, and we are exactly 91¼ inches away from the house on the inside edge of this picture frame board. And with a string checked, and it is perfectly straight, so we can now proceed to get our hidden fastener clips in place. And that has to start with a starter clip right up against the outer picture frame board. So I put the little piece of spacer in there. I've got one of the clips sitting here. And with that in place, I am going to take this drill and I'm going to mark the center of the hole where that's got to be. With that marked, I am going to drive just a short drywall screw into that a little ways. And we are going to use a chalk line, go down to the other end, and get our gap down there, and we're going to drop a line, and all along that line we're going to drill pilot holes for the other clips. There. Got a chalk line at each spot there on the joist. We will drill a small pilot hole to locate that screw, and we'll start putting those clips in. Getting things laid out in advance helps speed the job. Rather than grab a clip and put it in, grab a clip, I laid them all out here. So I've got the pilot holes drilled, I've got the clips laid out. I can just get a screw into position here. Make sure I turn the clip the right way, that would help. And then fasten it in. Now I can see that I am going to have fun trying to hold those in place, so I am going to grab a pliers and just hold those steady with the pliers as I fasten the screw in. And it won't spin on me. That takes care of putting down the starter clips, and we are ready to start putting in deck boards. Unfortunately, these deck boards, I'm very disappointed in this, they're manufactured in factory under factory conditions and rolled out of some kind of a forming device, and the cladding is put on, yet the ends are not square. So I have to square up that end first and then take a measurement and cut off the additional portion here to make it fit to put it on the deck. So we're going to get started on that now so we can get one board ready to put in. I'm going to have to refer to my temperature chart for the current temperature right now and what I expect the high temperature to be to get my gapping. And that's going to change throughout the day as it warms up. So that'll be a process. Need to keep that chart close by. Last night when I set the gaps on these boards, it was pretty cool outside. There wasn't a lot of heat from the sun, and that gap was wide enough you could almost drive a truck through it. Well, now today, with the temperatures we have, and they're in the low 60s right now, but with the sun shining on these, that gap is closing right up. Because if we look at the thermometer here, the temperature of the boards is between 100 and 105 degrees. Even though the air temperature is much lower. So I have to go by that when I'm deciding what kind of a gap to leave on the end. I'll have to leave less of a gap than if it was just, say, 70 degrees outside. Just like with clamps, you can never have too many tape measures either. I'm going to leave the white tape measure stretched out to keep measuring the distance between the two picture frame boards. Just keep moving that down rather than have to reset that every time. And then I've got a second tape measure here to measure the board. You can tell it's fall. All of a sudden, clouds moved in, sun's behind the clouds, everything cooled off. It's back down to 58 degrees. I checked the temperature of the boards, and they're down to around 75 degrees already. Makes a difference. The board's cut, flipped over, dropped in place. Eyeballed what I needed for a gap on each end, and then I proceeded to lock it into these starter clips. Had to tap a little bit with a rubber mallet as I went to get it in there, and then use a clamp to hold it in place. As I moved my way down, I kept clamping, maintained that gap, which is the gap provided by those clips when you get the board put in there, till I get down to the end. Then I checked again, and of course that moved a little bit, my end gap, so I eyeballed that on both ends, and I needed to move it this way just a little bit. So I used my old trick for removing casings without damaging them. I stuck a couple of these scrapers in between between the end of the board and the picture frame board, and then I just ever so slightly with my hand, I inserted this, gave it a tap, and that nudged it just far enough so I'm even on both ends. Now I am ready to start putting the front clamps on and get this board secured. Now you're going to ask, okay, that's fine using these clamps for the first board because they reach that far. What are you going to do with the rest of it? Well, then I'm going to have to use a bowl wrench to pull that into place as I go. Get it started, get a couple of clips in to hold it, keep working my way down with the bowl wrench until I get that second board squeezed in. But first I got to get it measured and cut. And just like that, the sun's back out, vest is off, and it feels warm again. That's the way it is in the fall. I want to point something out that I discovered while I was doing this. I noticed that my gap appeared to be closing, and I loosened up and looked, and these starter clips bend easily. And when I pulled this in to get the bow out of the board so I could get a good measurement, I found out that it bent these clips back just a little bit. So what I had to do was release that board and straighten those clips out again to a perfect 90. And what I did then to prevent that from happening the next time, I put my spacers in along the way and drew into where the spacer was snug. And that was enough to get it in position and in the clip without bending the clip back. So that's something to bear in mind if you're using the hidden fastener system. Well, I got that mess all straightened out. Now I'm going to start putting in the other clips on the front to hold this in place and then be able to move on to the next board. At the rate I'm going, I should have this done by Christmas. Got everything straightened back out. I laid clips out, one for each joist, so I don't have to keep grabbing them out of the container. And I've got the screws handy, and I can just keep moving that box down. And I'm going to start putting the screws in these clips to fasten this one, and then we can go on to the next board. And of course, these screws, unlike everything else, instead of being a Torx drive, have to be a square drive. So you put your clip in position, put your screw at an angle, and snug it in. And that's all there is to it. Now you've got to be careful you don't get it so tight that you can't get the next board in. And I see this is already over tightened. So I got to figure this one out here. Well, that certainly didn't go well yesterday. I tried to put a couple clips in, just the way I was told to do it. Put the screw in at an angle, and that's the way it was described on the sheet. And that just ended up crushing that clip down too far where there's no way you could get the next board squeezed into it. Bad angle. So I went back to the videos and I looked at the video from the manufacturer, and in fact, watching their video, they were going almost perfectly vertical putting the clip in, so I tried that. Then I watched a couple other videos, and what I'm finding is that I'm not the only one that's having a hard time with these clips. The T-clips they sell, some love them, some don't love them. I didn't bother with the T-clips because these were recommended. these hidden fastener system decking clips. Come from the manufacturer. So I tried those, and judging by what other people are saying, no one's really got a good system for putting these in. Some drive them in at an angle, some straight in, some leave them loose and then tighten them later. Some put them in with the clips down too far and then they pry the clips up. So I'm going to be experimenting today until I come up with the right formula. I did get a couple of them in to a point where I could take a scrap board from an end I cut off and put it in here. And it wasn't easy. I got it the clips just to the point where I could get the board in, take the rubber mallet and tap it in. I can see that this is going to be an interesting challenge. I apologize for the shadow on this shot, but I'm not really going to get much good sun on this to show you, but I think you get the idea. Something else I learned yesterday is that these boards are slightly cupped, and if that board is cupped up on the one side and you try to put one of these clips in, you're just going to end up getting the clip in a bad position because it will not draw that board down. So what I'm doing now is at each joist I'm clamping this board down that's clipped on the other side so that it is tight to the joist before I attempt to put this clip in. The other thing that I want to note is when I put the clip in, then because of this trial and error process I'm going through, I start out on one side with the clip still firmly resting on the joist. But by doing that, if something goes wrong trying to attach this, I can still move it over to the other side of the joist and get a good position for the screw to go in and still grab. If I, just start out in the center, I don't necessarily have that opportunity. Sun keeps popping in and out, changing the temperature out here. It says the air temperature is 59 degrees, but with the sun it feels a lot warmer than that, and that affects how these boards are expanding. I'm seeing that already, so I got to be real careful as I go along. Got that first board anchored in with the clips, and I think I've got a system, even though I'm probably not into a rhythm on doing this, but I got that board in and I got these clips in such a way that I can work the next board into the clip, and then as I go along I have to pull that bow in, and I'm being aided by this bow wrench that I had to drive 60 miles to pick up because the local store, which is 14, 15 miles away, said they had one in stock but they couldn't find it. So this has been an adventure getting the tools I need, but there's no way you would do this without a bow wrench to keep pulling those bowed boards in the line. So you get started on the other end, get a couple clips in, and just keep working your way down. I've got it pulled into the clip on this end, and as before, I took the clamp and clamped down the cupping on here so I'm flat on the joist, and I'm going to put these next 3 clips in and just keep working my way down. And when I get done with this board, I'll have a better idea how that worked out. And then I'll show you how I ended up putting those clips in. Another morning and the deck adventure continues. The temperature has just now gotten close to 50 degrees, about 9:30 in the morning. So I did some other things to let the sun get on here and warm these boards up a little bit. And we managed yesterday to get 3 more boards secured. My wife was helping me. We experimented with different techniques with these clips and getting the boards put into the clip. And believe me, it's been a challenge trying to figure out a way to do this quickly and easily. I have another 5 boards cut over there, plus this board that I'm going to try putting in right now. Hopefully I can get those in quickly now today and get those other boards cut and get myself all the way up to the house where I got to do some fitting for that last board that's going to have to be ripped. Had to come up with a bunch of devices here. They tell you need to tip this board a little bit to get it started in the clip. Well, easier said than done, particularly when it's cupped like this. So I just took a long clamp with a couple of boards, one on each side, and clamped it. Now I've got some leverage to pull this up to get it in place. And then the clips, I'll show you when I put more clips in, the actions I have to take with each clip to get it so it accepts the board without getting caught on the edge and breaking that. So you can just get the board started under the clip and get it forced back in with a rubber mallet and using this, and then work your way along, working with the bow on the board to get it secured. I'm holding the dimension properly. I have the same dimension from the house to the outside edge of that picture frame board on both ends, so I can use that as a reference point, and I am the same distance from the edge of that board to the edge of that last board that went in on both ends. So I'm holding this, I'm straight. The clips themselves, depending on how well they go in, sometimes there's some variation in the width between the boards, so I'm having to be very careful and kind of eyeball that, and sometimes hold the board out just a little bit or pull the board in just a little bit further if I can to maintain the gap and the spacing as I go along. So let's take a crack at getting one of these boards started and installed so we can put more clips in. All right, we need to start setting this new board into the clips. I set the board here. I made sure I had my gap matching the last board that went in. I cut these boards all to the same length, the same time of the day when they were the same temperature. And then I start out a little tight here. I take my two scrapers, set them in, and then just lightly tap here with my hand pushing the pry bar in until I get the gap that I need. The board gapped on the end. Now we start the fun process of trying to get it started into that clip. As I said, you need to tip it a little bit. Now I had to open these clamps up just a little bit, and I'll show you that when I put a new clamp in, what I have to do there. So I tip this up, and you can see this board rocks because it's got a cup in it. And I'm going to see if I can get it started into that clip just by using the bowl wrench and tipping it up. And I can't, so I'm going to have to change my angle here. This is where it gets interesting. Get some pressure on that bowl wrench with my knee. Get this board held down on the back side. And I have it started in the clip. As soon as I get it started there, I need to hold it in position so it doesn't move on me. I can put a clip in. So I get a clamp over here, and then it moved a little bit. There, I got it tapped in, and I'm going to get another clamp put in right down here. I'm going to give this just a little bit of a nudge to get it as close as I can. Have that held somewhat in position. There's a little more of a push here. See if I can get this clamp set. Yep. Reset this a little bit. And there you go. That's how you start getting it in position. And with the bowl in there, it just keeps wanting to move. I'll get this closed back up. Because of the cupping, I have to get around this and pull that cupping down so I can get a clamp on, because you cannot get these clamps on if that board is lifted at all off from the joist. There we go. Keeps wanting to float out on me. Okay, we've got that gap set. Grab a clip. Grab one of the screws. Carefully set that clip where it needs to be. And make sure I haven't moved out of position. You can see what a treat this is to do here. I'm going to remove this because it's in my way. I don't need it here right now. I'm going to need it when I get further down. I'm going to give this another shove here. And if you don't get these clips on just exactly the right way to start with, and you have a problem. And they are very hard to keep in place. You got to be very careful when you hold the screw over position here to get it in. Ouch, hard to get started. Drive the screw in at a slight angle. Make sure that the clip is straight on to the board. Finish driving it in. And hope you didn't move. I'm going to check and see if I moved here. Yes, I did. This is a nightmare putting these in. It's just an absolute nightmare. So I'm going to back this one out because it's going to be way too far out. That's why I start the clips on one side of the joist or the other. Oh. And if you get those too tight, they start to spin and they don't grip. So that's what you're up against. And then I have to take each one with a claw hammer and open up those clips to get the next board put in. And that's the process. Sometimes it goes better than that. Sometimes it doesn't go that well. And again, this thing moved on me. This is where it's sometimes better to have two people. Somebody can keep the pressure on this while you're putting this thing in. So there you have it. We got another board started. Now I got to work my way down the board and keep repeating this process. Get it pulled into that clip and get another clip put on here to hold it in place. Not fun, not pretty. Not impressed. Working by myself this morning, I experimenting with different techniques. So what I did was got it started down on this end. Got a couple of clips in finally with the right gapping. That was a challenge. Then I got it a little bit further and I put in a construction screw to hold it in place while I worked my way down the line and decided to pull the board in way down at the end and keep clamping along to keep it from sliding. Now the gap is not correct at that far end yet. It still needs to be closed up, but I've closed it up a lot of the way along here. So what I'm going to do now that I've got my gap set is start filling in these clips on this end. before I try to pull that big gap in down at the far end. Here's a note on these clips that are used to hold the boards in place. Here's what I run into. This is what a new clip looks like. And you can see there's not a lot of space there to grab that lower web, just barely enough. And they're kind of hard to put in. What's happened on several is when you can't get enough space to push it in, pushes it back, and in some cases breaks it off. You can see that here, and I got a handful of them. This one, it just pushed the one way back, and I knew if I'd straighten it, I would just break it off. So that's where it's very important. Open it up just a little bit, but not so much that you push it back or break it. And then you have to be very careful to get that board tipped and started in and tapped in. Well, we start out today from square one. I'm really disappointed. Sad news. We gave up on these clips. They just don't work. They bend back, they break off. With these boards cupped and bowed, it's almost impossible to get them started, keep them in place. And you're replacing clips, you're trying to open clips up. So we went to the material desk where we got this stuff, because when I ordered this is what the manufacturer's estimator told me to use. And if you look at the label on the jar for these clips, it says that they work with this particular style of decking, which is the higher end decking sold by this company. But these clips only allow for a 1/4 inch web on that deck board. And those webs are 3/8 of an inch thick. They're thicker than some of the other styles. So it was a constant battle. It just wasn't working. What we had down, if you look down the line, half the clips weren't grabbing and they were jammed into the side. Gave up. Went to the material desk and the guy said, "Oh yeah, these don't work very well. You really want to use these." Well, I'm not happy about that, but I've seen these used in different videos, and I tried the first board yesterday, and these go in really well. Pretty fast, T-clip process. So that's what we did. We decided and it only took us like a half an hour, 45 minutes to pull all the old clips and pull the boards back out of the way yesterday. And I'm going to get a fresh start today. Now, I have lost essentially 3 days of very good weather for working on this deck, but I'm thinking the way these seem to work, I should be able to make that up today and get the rest of these deck boards in. So that's where we're at on this deck project. Just a warning to you, be careful what you get for clips. Don't scrimp on that. These are more expensive, but I think they're going to do a better job. So starting from scratch this morning, in 3 hours of actual work time, I was able to install 14 deck boards using these T-clips all by myself, just moving down with the bow wrench. It was no problem at all. Get it slid in, get everything snugged, So I wish I would have gone with these to begin with and just ditched the ones they sent with the order when I ordered the stuff. So a tip for you, if you're putting in decks like this, use something like this. There are other varieties of a T-clip style. I think some of those would work better if the boards were straight. When the boards are crooked, that they clamp on the joist. I don't think it would do you a lot of good. Where these, I can just put them in as I go along. Fantastic results. I'm down to the end now where I have to start fitting boards to make that connection to the house, and that last board there is going to have to be ripped down to size. That won't take me long. I'll have that done this afternoon. I might even get the skirting on. Another quick note, the possibility of having to leave a board here that I could take in and out with screws if I needed to get to the window well, which I don't really need to do, but on the off chance that ever happened, I did sister some treated lumber to the inside of each of those joists, and if it ever comes up, I can do a saw cut on a single board, pull it out, and when I put it back, I've got something to attach it to. Never hurts to think ahead, just in case. And now the fun part. I have to determine how wide to make the last board between the house and this last board I put in. So I'm going to get this board pulled as far back as I can, and it'll have to be fastened with screws up here. I can't use clips anymore. And I measure 4 15/16. Okay, from that 4 15/16, I have to deduct now the 3/16 gap here on the board, and I have to deduct some expansion space over here, which I'll probably take about 3/16 of an inch since it's all hidden underneath this flashing. That'll give me some wiggle room to play with here putting that board in. So with that, we're going to rip this last board. That'll have to go in first, and then we'll drop and then pull it in to this board. Except for all the box elders and Asian beetles that are attacking me right now because they've been picking all the soybeans in the neighboring fields. You couldn't ask for a more beautiful day to be working on something like this. It's October 11th. It is 78 degrees out. And it is just beautiful. Our maples still haven't really started turning yet. Some of the trees in the woods there have started to turn, but it won't be long and the leaves will start to fall. We're supposed to have some colder temperatures next week and a little bit of rain, but then it's expected to be back in the upper 60s, low 70s by the end of next week. This has been quite a fall. There you have it. The last screw just went in. The top of the deck is done. Put the side skirts on and it will be finished. Today is the grand finale of the deck project and the summer projects, because Once this is wrapped up, I've pretty much got the whole house renovation stuff done for the year, and I'll be moving inside to do a couple of jobs in there over the winter. It's been a big, busy year. I picked today because it's very warm. I had clamped this cladding on, and that's the job we're going to finish today. I clamped it on yesterday. I wanted it to be out in what I expected to be some warm sunshine today. Again, this is October 20th, and it's already in the mid-70s around midday. Unusually warm, but works to my advantage. I wanted to see what the impact of that extra heat would be on the joint. All right, it's loose. Let's just see what we've got for a gap. Go your way just a little bit. I think that's pretty good. Hold it up in the air. Okay, that moved that way, and I think we can pull this one out just a fraction. This one doesn't have the same amount of heat on it, so we need to be careful here. I think that's good enough. I think we have it. I can start marking, drilling, and get this thing secured. Now that I have the boards clamped in place in the warmer temperature, and I can see how the miter joints are meeting up, and I've got the expansion right, I could actually fasten these now when the weather is just a little bit cooler and I didn't have as many Asian beetles crawling all over me. But I'd like to get this done because I want to get some caulking done that goes with the siding here, because with this type of siding I have to fill this joint right here where the manufacturer's caulking to protect the ends of the siding. And I want to get that done while the weather is warm. So we're going to go ahead and get this done. Following the manufacturer's recommendations, I have started from the center, which they tell me to do. Start from the center of a run. And then I have selected to make the spacing on these at each point 1.5 inches in from each edge. So I'm just going to take my Sharpie and I'm going to make a mark 1.5 inches in from the edge using the quick square here. And now I know where to drill my pilot hole, because these screws, they recommend drilling a 3/16 pilot hole first, and that's what I'm going to do. So I've marked that in the center, and I've marked it at each 12-inch point along here. They recommend every 12 inches. Till you get to the end, and then they ask that you stay 2 inches off from the edge. So that brings me into right about there. Put my square on. Well, I can't really get my square on there this way, so I'm going to have to use the tape measure. Got my finger in place. I don't have enough height there. Shallow deck. So, I have a pretty good idea where square is. Whoops. 1.5 inches in or down, and 1.5 inches up. And that's where I will drill the pilot holes on this side, and then get some screws put in there. Got all the pilot holes drilled all the way around. The manufacturer recommends putting these cladding screws in starting from one end and working your way down. I can on this end board because it's tight to the picture frame board all the way across. The other ones I'm going to have to start in the middle and work out, because I've got a terrible sag in the middle of each of those front boards and the one on that end. So this one will be easy. So I'm going to start on the end like they recommend. And I right away ran into something. Let's see what we get here. Okay, that one went in. I'll have to fix that later. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to continue working my way around. I was surprised with just using these quick clamps across the front and pulling this up, I was able to close that gap pretty easily. This stuff seems to be pretty flexible. So with that all closed up, I'm going to continue using the manufacturer's recommendation and work from one end out to the other. And I guess I'll start on this end and make sure that as the board moves, it moves towards the center where I still have some opportunity to adjust, because I like the spacing on this joint right now. And this is the perfect time. For just a little bit, I've got some shade from one of the trees, and those Asian beetles don't much care for shade. They just disappear. And once the sun hits here again, I'm going to get swarmed. So we're going to hurry up and get this done. There, one front board is done and we're in pretty good shape. So, 4 more screws to go here and we will be fastened. There, the last one is in and we have a front deck. Well, the caulking is all done next to the house to protect the siding, and I had a couple holes here where I would start the screw but I'd run into something, so I had to backfill that with a matching caulk. That looks pretty good, so this deck is done. I've got my makeshift steps back in place for this winter. Next year I'll be forming this up and extending that concrete slab with a poured concrete step right in front of this at the proper height. And then we'll be landscaping all around the deck to make it easy to mow around and have some flowers and things or plants out front. So that concludes a long, busy spring and summer of house upgrades to bring this place up to snuff the way we would like to have it for the rest of our retirement. If you've enjoyed watching this and that whole series of house refresh videos, well, please click like and consider subscribing to our channel. Going forward, you're going to see a lot more videos that talk just in general about retirement and hopefully more travel videos. We get back to Europe, Germany in particular, and as we travel around the United States to different locations, either by train or by SUV, and just keep track of what we're doing in retirement and maybe share some tips that be useful to you. So thanks for watching and we'll see you next video. Take care.